Okay, guys, one last session to go. We've got one last panel on building virtual teams. Can I ask Dan and Ed, please join me on stage?
Hello, hello.
Hey, Ed, how are you?
Very good, thank you. How are you?
Great, perfect, thanks. Perfect. Hey, Daniel, how are you?
Hey, Louw, good and you. It's great to see you. Hey, Ed.
Hey, man, great to see both of
How's
you
it?
guys. Excited about this last power session ahead of everyone logging off. Guys, Ed is the COO of Nona, one of the most impressive fintech software development companies that I've ever seen. And Dan runs a SME funding platform called Bridgeman that's also, I think, disrupting the way in which SMEs get financed in South Africa and beyond. So great to have you guys here. I think it's two fascinating, kind of executive, two fascinating companies we have. And what I really want to achieve with the session is just have a bit of a kind of like an experience share from your side around, this concept of building a virtual team. I think the idea of a company running fully remote 2 years ago was fairly foreign to most founders anyway. Like most teams were in office, building the vibe and the culture and the leadership in office around seeing their clients just there. But Ed, you guys with Nona have had a quite interesting journey in that ahead of COVID, you already started this journey of testing remote. Can I please just maybe for starters ask you to just kind of give a little bit of context to the company, like what do you guys do, your little elevator pitch if you don't mind, and then just tell us about how your team operates right now, and then also like how this remote journey started.
Yeah, sure. So Nona is a custom software development house. We focus on fintech and blockchain application only nowadays. So we used to do everything, food delivery, education, news, etc., but now exclusively fintech and blockchain. We are 35 people. Most of those people are still in Cape Town, even though we're now hiring further afield. And we typically work between South Africa, Australia, the UK, and the US. But at the moment, I have a client in Peru, or Ecuador rather, and some in Canada. So it's quite. We've always been quite global in our client base. So, and to your question about before COVID, how we started being remote. Basically, I don't know, I'm sure it's a distant memory now given the pandemic that swept the world, but we had a bit of a water crisis in Cape Town looming, I think, in 2018, and everyone was shitting themselves, panicking for this like water crisis that's going to come. And a lot of our staff were thinking, well, I'm going to go and stay with my parents in Durban, and we wanted to get ahead of it because, it was going to be literal sort of water lines. And I was thinking, I don't want to hang around in Cape Town for this. And at the time, we were operating with literal physical agile boards with sticky notes and teams that would meet around the physical agile board and move the sticky note. And that's awesome. To be clear, I actually miss big parts of that it creates a different level of engagement than you get remotely. But we realized, we are not prepared for, the toilets not being able to flush in the office and people being away from the office. So I think that was in 2018. We decided to do a full remote experiment and just go, cool, we're going to spend a week out of the office and see how that goes. We're going to spend 2 weeks out of the office and see how that goes. And then we rolled that forward to a full 4 months with no one coming into the office. Someone could come in if they wanted a bit of quiet time because the water crisis never happened. But effectively, we did the office empty for 4 months. And it really worked. We didn't lose any productivity. A lot of people were super stoked not to be going back and forth and travel for an hour a day. People with young kids were appreciating it. Their partners were appreciating it. We picked up a lot of new tools and ways to collaborate remotely. And after that 4 months, we decided this is great, but we're not going to come back, but we're also not going to stay completely remote. So what we're going to do is do 1 day a week in the office. And so all the way leading up to COVID, we were doing only 1 day a week in the office, and the rest of everything we did was fully remote. So it was a pretty seamless transition for us.
Sure. No, ahead of the curve for COVID. That's amazing. I almost can't remember the water crisis. That's crazy.
Well, there's been a lot worse crises since then.
Wow. Right? Hey, sure. No, the last 18 months have been 10 years, I think. Dan, can I please ask you to just share a little bit about what you guys are up to with Bridgeman, and also just maybe like what happened a little bit over 18 months ago when COVID hit?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so Bridgeman is a South African fintech that specializes in getting funding into the hands of SMEs as quickly as possible. We've got a number of funding products, and what makes us different to like a bank or a traditional credit provider is that we have made it really simple for businesses to access funding by integrating with their accounting packages, with bank accounts and all of that. And so they're able to basically submit or share their financial data without having to, upload documents and complete a whole bunch of paperwork and things like that. So no, that obviously I think is how we initially met, because we were the top financial services app, the top rated app on the Xero app marketplace. And you, of course, were huge in the Xero world, and so I think we first met at one of those Xero conferences. But so that's a bit about Bridgeman. In terms of our remote working, I think my sort of first experience with that was around the 2017 mark, where I just started Bridgeman, and I decided that I wanted to bootstrap it instead of going and raising some sort of angel investment. And the way in which I bootstrapped it was essentially I joined a platform, a company called Gigs that's based in Silicon Valley, which essentially sold software projects to enterprises around the world. But the people that they then staffed on those projects, the software engineers, the designers, the product managers, all of that, were from everywhere, from all over the show. And so it was this amazing experience where like this whole company, this organization of thousands of contractors around the world were all managed on Slack, and they built like their own management solution. And I joined as like the senior product manager type of role, where I'd coordinate engineers and designers and deliver these projects to these corporates. And it was just the most amazing experience. Incredibly difficult, especially when dealing with guys across time zones. I mean, we had one project where we had the client in India, a developer in Australia, and a developer on the west coast of America. So dealing with time
feels
zones,
like it's usually the other way around.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that was sort of my first taste of remote working, and seeing how easy, I shouldn't say easy, but how possible it was to achieve, and how you could really go and deliver great quality work to, on massive projects to large corporates. And it really didn't matter about not seeing, not having that sort of face-to-face interactions. So I think that was the start of it. And then, as Bridgeman grew and I stopped all of that and was fully focused on Bridgeman, and then we did do a capital raise eventually, I sort of was so used to that and made that a rule. Initially, it was only for the engineering team, where engineers were allowed one remote day every single week. And this was pre-COVID. And I just knew, because, engineers, it's really easy. It's also like, it's a very easy sort of business unit or function where you can like see the output, all the code is going to GitHub. You can see everything they're doing every day. Very easy to manage and monitor, as well as all the other tools and things that go with it. And then, COVID came along, and 2 weeks before President Ramaphosa made the announcement at the end of March, we just said, guys, we're feeling uncomfortable, let's go fully remote. And it was easy for us. We were a digital business. We had no paper in the office, no printers, nothing. We were fully digital. We were on Slack, we were on Trello, we were on all these tools already. And so, one day we just didn't rock up to the office, and it was amazing. It really, working remotely, we loved. Our business thrived, it multiplied in size. And then a few months into COVID last year, we just gave up our office, so we didn't have an office until last week. Actually, we went and opened up our office last week, and now we're in that hybrid mode where we're trying to work out how to manage hybrid, which I think is actually more difficult than being fully remote or fully in the office, because the coordination that's required is actually a bit more complicated now.
Let's get to that. I'm going to just in my question stack, but I think that you've raised a major point here, like hybrid work environments. Like, what prompted you guys to actually get the office again? I'm curious.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one of the things that we missed the most and that we struggled with the most was brainstorming. We just found like sitting and using some of like the digital whiteboards just was not the same. We couldn't do sort of achieve that. We found that onboarding new employees was a lot more difficult doing it fully remotely. Both, from a knowledge transfer point of view, but also from integrating them into the team. And with a lot of our teammates, we found that different people had different setups at home. So some were super comfortable working at home. They had generators, so load shedding wasn't an issue. They didn't have kids, so that wasn't an issue. Whereas others had kids and load shedding, and so we found we had to have the option to have an office. That's the call. I mean, we're still learning, so who knows where we end up. We're definitely in a test mode at the moment, but our test now is we've opened up an office, completely optional to come in. There aren't any forced days or anything like that yet. We're sort of trying to work that out and see what people sort of what their preferences are.
Got it. Sure. Fascinating. I think many companies are figuring that out right now. Hey, Ed, what are you guys thinking? Fully remote for the future or some kind of a hybrid solution?
Yeah, look, I loved hybrid. That was ideal at the time when it worked, because we'd meet in the office once a week, and like Daniel mentioned, there was some great collaborative work that happened at the time, whiteboarding style stuff, and a lot of lunch eating together and hacky sack predominantly that sort of spread the cultural thing. But that said, no, we are not thinking about going back to a hybrid approach. We're fully embracing remote and the sort of benefits that come from that. We're hiring more further afield. We're hiring people outside of Cape Town. And we find that the partial hybrid model would lead to even more of a feeling of alienation for our sort of new European and Joburg-based employees, etc., than it would. And that second-class citizen approach starts to happen, right? So what we've done instead is we've, at the moment, with Ideas Cartel in Cape Town and with budgets in other places, just gone, here are shared working spaces. You can do collaborative work there together. You want to get out of the house, you've got kids, and we've got these sort of not in full-time packages, because we know people aren't going to go in full-time, but they can go at least sort of once in every 2 days as part of the packages. We have the remote working locations, and then that gives them the option, absolutely, if they, like have the load shedding issues, have the kid issues. And again, I don't know if that's better. I certainly love the office, but there's too many benefits to the remote world that we're seeing in terms of reach, in terms of people's goals and dreams. I mean, for myself, I don't have a house anymore. I don't have a lease or an address. I'm in a different place every month, and that's awesome. And a couple of other people are doing similar things, and going to France and working from there. And as the pandemic chills out, the scope of that opens up even more, and that sort of quality of life that you can get from being able to live that way. And I don't mean permanently on the road like I am. I just mean I want to go and stay with my mom in Durban and work from that house for a month and build those relationships up again. It's a massive change to having a commitment where you have to be in a particular place.
The flexibility is amazing, right? But I think then just the big question is just culture, right? Like people build like trust relationships and engage in a different way face to face than online. There is just still a slight barrier.
Yeah.
How do you guys continue to build a great company culture and those interpersonal trust relationships?
Yeah, so the problem with this is I don't have enough data to know if what I'm going to say now is actually working. We do a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of tools and tricks that we're employing to ensure that. But I'm also riding the wave of an excellent culture that we developed by being in person together. So I can't say if this stuff's working. So we do a lot of events. These are all elective. We do a lot of virtual and in-person events. So we've done murder mysteries, quiz nights where I'm doing the quiz nights where a stranger's facilitating it, escape rooms, one with South African people, one in Britain, one just that's in America, like all sorts of online events, online poker evenings, all sorts of stuff, right? And those are all elective, but getting incredibly good uptake on that during the pandemic. And now even post-pandemic, there's some people that are further remote or don't want to come to the in-person events. So they're still at 50, 60% of the company still plays the online games. Then we do at least monthly, there'll be like a breakfast or a dinner or very informal, just like, hey, people are meeting at this place and doing that, and it's on our tab. And then at least quarterly, a far more organized one. And those, at the moment, the people that live in Cape Town, again, it's about 80% of the people that are coming to those now. That'd be go-karting or riding scooters down the mountain and ziplining or something like adrenaline-y with the group together. So we're doing a lot of that. To your point, like organized video meetings feel kind of foreign and you're not kind of building the same rapport. But if you're responsible for a group of people and you don't have the office anymore, what we do is just phone someone sometimes not even scheduled, a regular fucking phone call, right? And don't talk about work stuff as much as you can. Like you want to get to know people, like say that, like have the conversation like you're trying to make a friend if it's not someone you know well, or it's the new guy at the office. So, talk about the wife, the kids, the sports you're into, what do you drink, whatever. And like, I find it kind of easy because I'm generally quite extroverted. So maybe it's not easy for everybody, but the more you do it, the easier it becomes as well. And those informal conversations are huge and really help. And yeah, the trickier thing is getting to encourage that between people. And not making it like a mandated thing that leadership does. But again, we're really riding the wave of an excellent culture where some of people are already friends from having worked together for 7 years, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know that in a fully remote environment, starting that way, that these things work. But we've had really good reports in our we hired about 8 or 9 people since the pandemic. And we've had really good feedback from them, or maybe they're just too new to tell us the truth. We had really good feedback from them on the onboarding experience remotely and the amount of contact they have with people and the answers they get to questions and things.
Well, thank you. There's a lot of golden nuggets there. I think tons of people are making notes at the moment around that. Thank you very much for that. Dan, we have to just about wrap up, but I do want to hear kind of like what your biggest remote leadership tactic would be if you were to kind of like run a team that, we'll assume even if some people go to the office some days, most of your communication team-wide still for a very long time and maybe indefinitely will be at least partially remote. What do you do?
Yeah, I think, this might be a bit contentious. I know my partner, Christy, works for a digital agency where they're always like video off. I'm a huge believer in video on. When you're remote and not seeing people, I think there's massive value to seeing people's faces. And also it means that like you can see if someone's actually concentrating in the meeting or, they're doing other things. I think when you're remote and you're communicating a lot by text, I think it becomes even more important to over communicate and even use emojis, because tone and emotion is often lost, right, when you're talking in written text. I think focusing on and investing time in those social interactions is so much more critical when you're remote. And so those more sort of frequent events and socializing things, I think is important, and you have to be creative. I think it definitely requires a bit more effort. Like when you're working in an office and an employee gets stuck on something, it's super easy for them to pop up and ask a question. I think sometimes when you're working remote, people might take longer to actually ask those questions and try and get unblocked. And so sometimes you have to be a bit more hands-on in terms of checking in and making sure that everything's okay. I think the last tip I would give is, the usage of tools, things like Slack and Trello or Jira or whatever your preferences are critical. But it's also how you use those. Trello or Jira, much more of an asynchronous type of messaging tool, and project management type tool, or whatever you want to call it. Slack, obviously, a lot more synchronous. They have their benefits, they have their pros and their cons, and I would just say use them wisely. Be super careful, because if you use them in the wrong way, they can be terrible. If you use them in the right way, they can be the most amazing things and really enable that remote working.
Love it. Dan, thank you so much for spending time with us today. That's unfortunately all we've got time for. I would love to pick your brains for another hour on how we get this remote and or hybrid leadership thing like just perfect. But yeah, I really appreciate the insights shared, and good luck with both of your companies.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks, Louw. Thanks for the invite. Cheers, Dan.
Thanks.
Yeah,
guys.
thanks, Louw. Cheers. Cheers, Ed. Ciao.